In the previous chapters, we took a deep dive into the political machinations and theological notions supporting the siblings' rise to power within the movement. We saw that, under the leadership of Mrs. Hak Ja Han, in collaboration with the clerics, Sean and Kook Jin Moon achieved power and position through lies and manipulation, undermining Reverend Sun Myung Moon's lineal succession plan, and Dr. Hyun Jin Moon's position and authority as fourth Adam and true successor. Dr. Moon's younger brothers colluded with the cabal to advance an unprincipled set of satanic theological notions that brought about the destruction of Reverend Moon's marriage and family, culminating in a schism in the unification movement. Members must consider the grave consequences of Sean and Kook Jin Moon's actions, and the pivotal role they played in diverging from the unification movement's historical tradition, foundational principles, and core teachings. Their departure from the path laid down by Reverend Moon and Dr. Moon represents a significant fracture with movement tradition that turned it into a shadow of its former self within a few years. By exploiting positions of power and influence, they not only compromised the integrity and core values of the movement, but also disrupted the unity, familial bonds, and sacred trust within the true family. Through this series, we uncover the depth of their betrayal, highlighting the trail of destruction they have left behind, and the metamorphosis of a once messianic movement into a chaotic cult driven by personal vendettas and misguided convictions. As we explore the intricate web of deceit, manipulation, and outright defiance of divine providence spun by Sean and Kook Jin, it becomes imperative for members to critically assess the far-reaching implications of these actions, not only on the legacy of Reverend Moon, but on the very essence and future direction of the unification movement. In this third and final chapter of this series, we will focus on the heinous and devious actions that Sean and Kook Jin took in their rise to power to hijack the movement. Once they secured organizational control, the siblings broke with movement tradition by engaging in a vicious character assassination campaign against their elder brother, Dr. Moon, weaponizing litigation to crucify him and his followers. This video serves as a serious call to members to understand that the cabal must be held accountable for the incredible damage they caused to God's providence, destroying everything that Reverend Moon and Dr. Moon built up. Dr. Moon started his public mission in 1998 at the height of a scandal in the True family, precipitated when Nun Suk Hong divorced Hyo Jin Moon, and then published a scathing book about the challenges of her marriage. At that time, the clerics wanted to throw Hyo Jin under the bus, and wanted to attack Nun Suk Hong to save the reputation of the Unification Church. However, as the fourth Adam and elder son, Dr. Moon strongly opposed their plan. Dr. Moon told the clerics, "Over my dead body," and led the movement through this tumultuous phase of its history, in a way that not only uplifted the true parents and true family, but also moved the movement beyond the squabbles that the crisis caused. Staying true to the movement's ideals that emphasize forgiveness and redemption, Dr. Moon recognized that individuals can have challenges in their relationships and in marriages. In contrast to Dr. Moon's approach, when Sean and Kook Jin gained position and power, they shamelessly attacked their brother, who was acknowledged by their father as the legitimate heir and fourth Adam, holding the position of elder sonship within the True family. They did so to steal his position and status. Such an unprecedented level of attacks departed from the movement's tradition of never publicly attacking a leader, let alone a member of True family, and especially the fourth Adam and Reverend Moon's successor. The cabal also enlisted In Jin Moon with Mrs. Han's support. In Jin was invited back after years in obscurity, with the specific objective to undermine Dr. Moon, but was forced to resign in disgrace from her position in 2012, when news broke of her infidelities and having an illegitimate child broke. In July 2008, the Family Federation issued a public memo, announcing the appointment of In Jin Moon as the so-called chairperson or CEO of the U.S. movement, a position that did not exist. The memo installing her falsely claimed that this appointment was made at true parents' instructions. Soon after being declared chairperson, and showing the true intent of the cabal, In-jin convened a board meeting of the HSA-UWC to take control of that entity. There, she removed board members, removed the chair of the board, regional director Pyunghwa Kim, installed clerics that supported her, and installed herself as the chair of the board. Her actions caused grave confusion among the U.S. leadership, who understood that Reverend Moon had long ago designated Dr. Moon as the overall leader of the region, including the United States. When In-jin told HSA board members to step down from the board, they did so because they believed it was Reverend Moon's request. They wrongly believed that In-jin's actions were approved by Reverend Moon. They were not. In an overt violation of trust, she installed her cronies onto the HSA board, and took institutional legal control of an entity that controlled billions in assets. Reverend Moon on 4 separate occasions confirmed and reconfirmed to Dr. Moon, Pyunghwa Kim, and other clerics including Peter Kim, Dong Moon-ju, and Chang-shik Yang, that In-jin was supposed to be a mere ceremonial pastor, who was to work under Dr. Moon's authority. But, in con artist fashion, the cabal twisted Reverend Moon's words, and claimed that she was in charge of the U.S. movement. This is akin to entering a bank with false credentials, firing the top management, and taking control of the bank under false pretenses. The 2 brothers and the clerics were complicit in In-jin's illegitimate appointment, and in the memo that purportedly validated her, as well as in supporting the changes In-jin made to the HSA board. The memos issued by the Family Federation were a fabrication, and an abuse of Reverend Moon's identity, to advance the cabal's agenda. In a movement built on trust, and the understanding that Adamic authority is absolute, the abuse of Reverend Moon's name was unthinkable, but only possible due to Mrs. Han. Yet, that is what the cabal did on a continual basis without remorse. After the cabal wrested control of HSA by installing In-jin, she led an all-out attack against her brother, using the bully pulpit of the church. Everything In-jin did during her period as leader, before being unceremoniously removed, broke with Unification Movement tradition. She created a new church service called Love and Life Ministries, in which all members in the United States were forced to watch her sermons. No longer could local communities worship by reading Reverend Moon's words, but instead all had to tune in to listen to her providentially irrelevant sermons. Her sermons ranged in topic, from attacking Dr. Moon through thinly veiled metaphors, to justifying In-jin's own hedonistic lifestyle, to singing praises of her 2 brothers Sean and Kook-jin. Her former husband, Jinsung James Park, abused his public position, and used members for his multi-level marketing campaigns, and got himself involved in a scandal with a second-generation girl. In-jin herself was involved in several affairs, breaking apart other families and bringing tragedy to the victims. Instead of focusing on divine principle and character education for the youth, as had been traditionally done in the movement, she dismantled such programs, and made second generation participate in ballroom dancing. In the end, what did her in, were her infidelities which led to a child out of wedlock, another first in the history of the movement and the history of the true family. Shockingly, Sean, Kook-jin, and the clerics knew of her situation, but consciously chose to turn a blind eye. Not only that, they tried to hide her dirty little secret, while marginalizing her lover's former spouse, to prevent her from letting the movement know what In-jin had done while she was the leader of the United States Church. In-jin's shocking, immoral, and hypocritical actions single-handedly led to the mass exodus of second generation from the movement, not only in the United States, but everywhere in the world. It also did tremendous damage to the reputation of the true family and Reverend Moon's legacy, as her affair was exposed just as he passed away. The damage from her leadership is immeasurable, and its impacts are felt in the movement to this day. Sean and Kook-jin engaged members and the Korean media, publicly denouncing their brother as Satan and fallen Adam. They claimed that the person behind Dr. Moon, and who was supposedly controlling him, was Reverend Chung Hwan Kwok. On that basis, the cabal branded Dr. Moon and his supporters as the Kwok Group to disparage and delegitimize him and his work, and belittle his role as the elder son of Reverend Moon, even though he was the fourth Adam and son who represented the position of elder sonship within the true family. The cabal used the full brunt of their positions, authority, and resources to mount a campaign to eliminate Dr. Moon. This campaign went on for years. The fourth Adam and successor, who was faithfully pursuing Reverend Moon's providential directives, went the way of the cross at the hands of his own brothers, his mother, and these satanic clerics. One of the cabal's goals was to seize legal control over all of the movement's assets. This is why legal control was paramount to their regime. Kook Jin promoted and championed the notion of organizational and legal means to maintain control over assets. The only way for the cabal to legitimize their hijacking of movement assets was to take legal control of them, away from the Adamic figure's spiritual authority. The Yoido Park 1 project was initially being developed by Reverend Chung Hwan Kwok, and would later be put under Dr. Moon's charge by Reverend Moon in 2006. But Kook Jin wanted the project for himself. In an attempt to take over the project, Kook Jin went after Reverend Kwok, initiating investigations against him and alleging him to be a thief. But despite Kook Jin's attempts to frame Reverend Kwok, the investigators and tax authorities found no fault against him. Kook Jin was greatly frustrated that he could not pin down Reverend Kwok with any actual evidence of corruption. But that did not stop him nor the clerics from attacking Reverend Kwok and Dr. Moon. Kook Jin's repeated attacks eventually caused the Park 1 project to come to a halt. Reverend Moon was not happy with Kook Jin's actions, and instructed him to learn business management under his older brother, Dr. Moon. Instead of accepting his father's instructions, Kook Jin, Mrs. Han, and clerics forced a situation to make Kook Jin chairman of the Tongil Foundation. Later, in 2011, leaked emails between clerics revealed that Reverend Moon never appointed Kook Jin to the position of Tongil Foundation chairman. In June 2011, Alejandro de Souza, one of the Unification Church clerics, wrote to fellow cleric Dongmo Shin.
Reverend Shin, the thing I thought after watching Kook Jin Nim video is that in Spain several times, True Father said that I never named Kook Jin as the president. Of course I will keep Father's statements a secret, but because he repeated those words 3 or 4 times, it must mean something, right?
Kook Jin, clerics, and the cabal were censoring and ignoring Reverend Moon's instructions when those instructions interfered with their agenda. They wore Reverend Moon on their sleeves, telling members to be absolutely obedient to his words. Yet, they were the first ones to ignore his instructions, and hide them away from members when it was inconvenient to them, or when it went against their agenda. The Unification Church during the period of Sean and Kook Jin was not following Reverend Moon's lead at all, but was instead going down its own, separate and satanic path under the protection of Mrs. Han. As shown in the previous video on the truth of the clerics, the depth of the depravity of the cabal is unimaginable. Here are a few examples of the cabal's actions in their campaign to character assassinate their brother. Kook Jin and Sean used the occasion of the festivities of Reverend Moon's birthday in 2010 to have clerics Peter Kim, Richard Bach, and others publicly attack and criticize Dr. Moon in front of members and leaders of the Family Federation in an unprecedented event. In February 2010, Peter Kim falsely claimed Dr. Moon was jealous that Sean became successor, and that he claimed to be the new true parents, because his parents had failed. Richard Bach used the occasion to falsely denounce Dr. Moon as a son who sued his own mother. In addition, they coordinated a smear campaign all over Korean media, from broadcast to major daily newspapers and other outlets to reputationally crucify Dr. Moon. The cabal's efforts to generate a negative impression of Dr. Moon went unchecked. Sean and Kook Jin also used their position to order Unification Church pastors to film loyalty pledges on camera, where they record themselves criticizing Dr. Moon and Reverend Kwok. Those who did not follow their direction were fired and ostracized from the movement. The two brothers weaponized what were supposed to be providential organizations to launch a bureaucratic attack against their brother. They issued memo after memo, claiming that changes to boards required Sean's permission, removing people associated with Dr. Moon from movement positions, shutting down providential activities that Dr. Moon had successfully led, disparaging GPF activities, and imposing ridiculous burdens to hold providential events. They sent a memo with an organizational chart, claiming that Sean himself was above the Family Federation and UPF, manufacturing and imposing a new and false hierarchy that never existed before in the history of the movement. The fake and worthless memos issued by Sean during his period as international president would subsequently be debunked by Mrs. Han in 2018. They were revealed to be a sham, never actually having received Reverend Moon's approval. Yet, these very memos were what the cabal used as a false pretext and precedent to later justify legal action against Dr. Moon. Some of the cabal's main attacks against Dr. Moon in the period of 2009 to 2012 include 1. Having cleric Chong Shik-yang do the bidding of fellow associates of the cabal in early 2009 by writing a fake spirit world message in Sokcho at the behest of Mrs. Han, which revealed that their true intent was to have Dr. Moon submit to Mrs. Han and Sean's leadership in a church structure. 2. Preparing the June 2010 bedroom video, where Reverend Moon is coaxed by Mrs. Han and Sean to proclaim Sean's successor. 3. Mobilizing a worldwide campaign of rallies and workshops to smear Dr. Moon's image by clerics like Joshua Cotter, Dong Mo Shin, Phyllis Kim and others. 4. Engaging the media to smear Dr. Moon and announce Sean as heir. 5. Weaponizing litigation to wrest entities away from Dr. Moon. 6. Using physical and legal means to stop Dr. Moon from visiting his father at his deathbed. 7. Removing Dr. Moon and his family's names from the list of bereaved family members when Reverend Moon passed away. 8. And using Unification Church members to form a barrier to prevent Dr. Moon from paying his respects at his father's funeral. The listed examples are but a few among countless dirty attacks perpetrated by the cabal. They violated the sacred trust that holds a family together, and crossed every line that should never be crossed, let alone within true family. Such level of unimaginable depravity comes from the cabal's own insecurity and illegitimacy. Yet, even with all the efforts and resources of the entire Unification Church focused against him, Dr. Moon's activities continued to flourish through these years. Those who understood the true nature and cause of the schism recognized this as an expression of Dr. Moon's heavenly fortune and righteous position supported by God. The cabal put Kook Jin in charge of the Unification Church of Japan, now Family Federation Japan, through which he stopped financial support towards UCI, an entity that historically was subsidized by approximately $100 million per year, under the corrupt and inept management of clerics Bo Hee-bok and Dong Moon-ju. For decades, UCI had been a financial headache for Reverend Moon. Ever since Dr. Moon graduated from Harvard Business School in the 1990s, Reverend Moon urged him to take the leadership of UCI. But Dr. Moon repeatedly refused to do so, because he recognized how difficult the necessary transformation would be. Dr. Moon chose instead to focus his energy on advancing providential goals in alignment to his father's end-of-church era mandate. Eventually around 2006, when providential activities were taking off and the rest of the movement was going in an upwards trajectory, Dr. Moon took on the task of restructuring UCI. However, Kook Jin knew of the tremendously difficult financial situation that UCI was facing and its historical dependence on subsidies. After the cabal installed Kook Jin as head of UC Japan, he proceeded to cut UCI's funding at a rapid pace to cause its collapse. Within just 3 years after Dr. Moon took charge of UCI, all funding from UC Japan stopped. If it collapsed, the cabal would get to report to Reverend Moon that UCI failed under Dr. Moon's watch. Their actions had nothing to do with God or providence, but instead were all political power plays for control and position. They did so knowing full well the implications such measures would have in an entity that required $100 million per year just to survive. With a Herculean effort by Dr. Moon, he miraculously weathered the storm to keep UCI alive, restructure it, and turn it around to become profitable. Coupled with the strategy of using financial means to make entities under Dr. Moon collapse, the cabal also weaponized litigation. In connivance with clerics, Kook Jin pursued vicious legal campaigns against his brother and the projects under him. Because the lawsuits were based on false and baseless claims and fabricated memoranda as justification, Kook Jin and clerics did not win in any of them. Litigation was never used in the movement's history, not even against those who deserved it for their corrupt behavior as church leaders. That's because the movement is a salvific movement, offering a path to redemption. Because the litigation they started was based on lies and completely fabricated claims, they have lost in some 30 legal cases they initiated against Dr. Moon and his supporters worldwide, including the UCI case. In the process wasting hundreds of millions of dollars in precious donations and charitable assets, that should have been used for providential activities. In summary, the cabal used all the movement's resources they had at their disposal to try to eliminate Dr. Moon, and failed. They departed from the movement's traditions that uphold true love and a path to salvation, redemption, and reconciliation, opting instead to engage in a vicious and satanic campaign to malign, destroy, and ultimately get rid of Dr. Moon, the rightful elder brother who was the fourth Adam, the Adamic figure of the age. After his disgraceful removal from the Unification Church, Sean took it upon himself to publicly attack his mother and the clerics who had once pushed the false narrative that he was Reverend Moon's heir to the membership. In 2015, Sean said the following about the church clerics.
This is what the Unification Church leaders tell me. Betray your father for political temporary power, keep the money, keep the billions of dollars of assets you are in control of legally, and just wait for your mom to pass away, and when she passes you do what you want.
What do Sean's words say about the cleric's attitude and goals? What does it say about Sean's own legitimacy? Any person with eyes to see and ears to hear can realize that neither Sean nor the clerics are people of sincere faith. Sean reveals what his regime was all about when he was part of the cabal, securing assets, money, and power. The clerics asked him to sell his father out for temporary political power, and Sean did so until they fired him. It is an ironic twist and a display of ignorance, that Sean attacked and called out the very leaders that vouched for him as supposed heir, calling them frauds, without realizing that delegitimizing them delegitimizes him even further. By admitting and denouncing the cabal's fraud, he is admitting that he is a fraud. Members have to ask themselves a serious question. If Sean is calling out Mrs. Han and clerics as frauds, then was there any part that was not fraudulent and fake in what the cabal did during Sean's period as International President of Family Federation? Sean's outbursts, if anything, confirm what the current series of videos have been telling members about the cabal. Through his own words, it is evident that everything that was conveyed to members at the time was a lie. Sean's revelation of what the clerics said to him does not only show the immoral nature of the clerics who betrayed Reverend Moon, but it also shows Sean's hypocrisy. For example, in relation to Reverend Moon's instruction not to change any of his holy texts, Sean reveals.
Right after Father passed, the leader gets on the speakerphone because he's ordered to, and he comes up on the speakerphone and says, Father told us, commanded us, that we must not even change one word of his scriptures or tradition. But I think there are some problematic things, and so I agreed to be on the committee to redact everything.
At the time of the incident, Sean was still the International President of Family Federation, and by his own decree and by the cabal's design, he was supposedly the highest-ranking person in the church. Sean could have ordered the clerics not to touch any of the holy texts. But he didn't. Sean did not stop the clerics from editing Reverend Moon's words, because Sean is complicit and benefited from the editing, censoring, and misrepresenting of his father's words. Sean knows that Reverend Moon's words and commands were not followed by the cabal, that he benefited from it, and that he was part of the very same group that expunged Reverend Moon's actual intent from the record. If Reverend Moon's uncensored and unedited words were to come out, it would reveal the lies perpetrated by the cabal. That is why Sean violated Reverend Moon's most important command of not changing any of his words, and simply went along with the cabal. In relation to the clerics' corruption and greed for money, power, and position, Sean said,
Father ordered to bring in a leader, so we brought him in. We were actually talking about his compensation because that's a serious thing. This guy was taking 5 different salaries in excess of 6 figures each. You are taking 5 different salaries to make $500,000 a year off the church.
Again, this type of corrupt dealing took place under Sean's leadership, and he even spoke with the cleric who was using the movement as his personal piggy bank, but Sean chose not to do anything about it. Sean decided to keep silent, and instead focus on attacking his elder brother, Dr. Moon. In relation to the false legitimacy of the church hierarchy, and the false church-issued memos, Sean said,
Loyalty to Father does not mean loyalty to the church hierarchy. That's where people mess up, because they've been conditioned to believe that loyalty to Father means loyalty to the memos that come down or loyalty to the church hierarchy.
Sean's contradictory statements speak volumes. Sean was the first person who cut from unification movement tradition and used the full weight of organizational power to try to force his elder brother and fourth Adam, Dr. Moon, to submit to church authority and hierarchy. Sean was the person who used and weaponized organizational position and institutional memos to drive out Dr. Moon. Sean was the very person pushing this type of corrupt leadership culture and making members align with the clerics. It was Sean who took advantage of an elderly Reverend Moon in the final years of his life, to sign a declaration to steal the successor position, and have his father solidify a church hierarchy that his father wanted to dismantle. While Sean was in power and in collusion with the clerics, he had no qualms of distorting, censoring, or going around his father's words. But, when it no longer serves him because he is no longer in power, suddenly everything they did became problematic to him. These contradictions reveal Sean's ignorance, lack of moral character, and hypocrisy. Everything these two brothers are complaining about today reeks of hypocrisy, false virtue signaling, and political gamesmanship, with not an ounce of truth, righteousness, or goodness. They directly contributed to the creation of the OBD cult, yet cry at the treatment they receive. Dr. Moon, who was innocent, was treated far worse at their hands than they were ever treated by the clerics, yet maintained his dignity and decency. After being used as tools and disposed of, these two feel cheated and angry. That childish bitterness permeates Sean's sanctuary church. Sanctuary Church continues to surprise members and society at large, with their notoriously cultish and embarrassing behavior. They shamelessly adopt and promote conspiracy theories, publicize their insane and cringeworthy AR-15 marriages, and have been the ridicule of media articles and documentaries. All of this is taking place with total disregard to the damage being caused to Reverend Moon's legacy and the wider movement. Today, Sean and Kook Jin, and their cultish sanctuary church are the poster child of all false cliches about the unification movement. This new cult's very existence makes a laughingstock out of Reverend Moon's work, legacy, and the providential movement he founded. Those who remain in the sanctuary church should reflect on what the movement truly stands for, and what lies they willingly swallow to justify themselves descending to the position they are in today. They must understand that the sanctuary church is as satanic and unprincipled as the OBD cult is, and that it is providentially irrelevant. Sean and Kukjin broke away from the sacred tradition of the unification movement. They turned what was once a vibrant messianic, providential movement for the salvation of all mankind, into a petty, tyrannical, and satanic church, rooted in their version of a cult of personality, that replaced God and Adamic authority, with flawed individuals that betrayed everything that is sacred. These two brothers defiled every unification movement tradition, by going down a path of destruction, using every means at their disposal, including litigation, to attack a member of the true family who is the fourth Adam. Sean and Kukjin allowed themselves to be used by the clerics like tools, violating every bond, heavenly law, and sacred trust that holds the true family and movement together. And in the wake of their actions, they left Reverend Moon's marriage destroyed, his family in tatters, and the foundation that Reverend Moon created in ruins. As if that was not enough, they also made a mockery of Reverend Moon's legacy with their unhinged sanctuary church cult. Their acts engendered a satanic culture within the Unification Church, that has lost sight of God and His providence, choosing instead to create a rotten little cult with false promises that, at the end of the day, negate individual and familial responsibility, which is central to the restorative process. The sins of Sean and Kukjin are greater than that of Cain, because they attempted to kill their elder brother who holds Adamic authority in the era of the true parents and true family, and is the one son who was leading the charge to bring about the new age of Chunil-guk through father and son cooperation. Today, the Sanctuary Church continues to defy the holy and sanctified messianic work of Reverend Moon, staining his legacy, and hindering the providential work of the fourth Adam. As you have seen, this 3-part video series has exposed the lies and fraud of Sean and Kukjin. You have seen the pathetic and hypocritical flip-flopping of their theological positions. They toyed with God's providence and whimsically switched their providential outlook, using the cover of religion as a means to justify their political goals. When Mrs. Han supported Sean as successor, they deified and divinized her as a godlike figure. When she stopped supporting them, they turned her into their worst enemy. Sean and Kukjin's self-centered and self-serving flip-flopping of their position exposes their total lack of a moral center and integrity. Members are encouraged to stop all association with the Sanctuary Church and return to the true root of Reverend Moon's work through the current Adamic figure who leads God's providence today, Dr. Moon. We hope members pray and reflect on the content in these videos to come to their senses, so that they may understand that they help to persecute and betray Reverend Moon's true successor and the Adamic figure who leads God's providence.